I'm going to make a confident prediction that Eddie Hearn, Matchroom and Sky will be having a pay-per-view event on May the 30th. We'll see if I'm right or if I'm wrong soon, but knowing Eddie Hearn, and with him effectively admitting recently that his business stream is around pay-per-view occasions, I think the card on May the 30th is building to something that will certainly be a pay-per-view event. Now, the card before, I'm going to come on to Brook in a minute, but before Brook was announced, this was looking like a very, very strong card. Probably not pay-per-view, certainly not in my mind. I'm thinking probably not even in Eddie Hearn's mind, but it was very, very strong. So just briefly, you've got Jorge Linares versus Kevin Mitchell in a lightweight world title fight, I believe for the WBC version of the lightweight title. Then you've got Lee Selby versus Gradovitz, I think for the IBF version of their title. On the undercard, you've got Dave Ryan versus John Wayne Hibbard, which is a brilliant sort of domestic Commonwealth level fight, I think in the light welterweight division. That's certainly a sort of good 50-50 for the hardcore fans. And then you've also got Anthony Joshua versus Kevin Johnson in what I deem to be a very, very good fight. Really looking forward to that one. I find it a really intriguing matchup, and one where we'll learn a lot and answer a lot of questions about probably the most well-known prospect in British boxing. So what I'm getting at is you have a very, very strong card to begin with here. Anthony Joshua in by far his biggest fight to date. A really, really solid 12-round hardcore fan domestic class in John Wayne Hibbard and Dave Ryan, plus two really decent world title fights, both of which I should add are highly competitive. Mitchell Linares and Selby Gradovitz. It's an excellent night. What I feel that lacked in terms of making it a pay-per-view card is a headline fight. Joshua Johnson, arguably that's the biggest fight of the night to the mainstream audience, but realistically that's a fight, Joshua versus a gatekeeper. It's not for a belt, it's not for anything too significant, and even though we view it as an intriguing matchup, we have to make Anthony Joshua a strong favourite. The other guys, Selby Gradovitz, Mitchell Linares, yeah, they're both excellent fights. But in terms of selling a pay-per-view, in terms of headlining it, being the man on the pay-per-view poster, I don't feel that Lee Selby or Kevin Mitchell have that profile. But then came a spanner in the works, and it was announced that Brook may well try and get out on the May the 30th card. It then became clear, and in my opinion, it's getting more and more likely every day, that Eddie Hearn is considering announcing Brook versus Frankie Gavin for that card. Now that's significant for two reasons. Firstly, that's the main event this card is looking for to make it a pay-per-view. Secondly, Brook, I would say, has a much higher profile than than Lee Selby or Kevin Mitchell. Brook and Anthony Joshua are the faces on the front cover of that pay-per-view. And for me, whether I think it's pay-per-view or not, I think it's an exceptionally strong card, assuming Brook Gavin is added. But I cannot see Eddie Hearn resisting making that a pay-per-view. 3 world title fights involving 4 British fighters. Anthony Joshua in a big step up, as well as John Wayne Hibbard versus Dave Ryan. Surely Eddie Hearn is going to make that a pay-per-view based on past record. Now, a few things to chuck in here. I am not hating on Brook Gavin as a fight. I'm really not. The reason being, we thought Brook was going to fight in the summer against Brandon Rios. That fight is still on the table. That fight is still on the cards. This is an additional bonus fight. This is an unexpected fight that's like an added extra, if you like. So, yeah, I'd be complaining if this was the big summer matchup. But it isn't. We're still getting the summer matchup. This is just in addition. Now, Brook could fight anyone in the top 15 for like a voluntary defence. But rather than fighting someone nobody's ever heard of, a Jojo Dan type opponent, I would rather had a British competitor against him, a fighter who's more recognisable, and a domestic, title fight, which always creates interest. So whilst I acknowledge that Brook Gavin isn't the most competitive matchup in the world, I'm happy to see it. Because I'm happy to see Kell Brook out when I didn't expect him to, and I'm happy for a domestic world title clash. And I must say, the card is an exceptionally strong card. I'm trying to be balanced here and not just hate on it because it's pay-per-view. But that is a really, really good card. 3 world title fights. John Wayne Hibbert, Dave Ryan, which I'll stop mentioning now, but I view that as a really interesting fight. And Anthony Joshua Johnson. So I can see that being pay-per-view. And I think that is the way it's going to go. Expect an announcement imminently, because obviously May the 30th isn't too long away, so they're going to need to announce Brook, Frankie, Gavin, in order to start promoting that fight and building it up. But I think based on past performance, based on some of the names that have been on pay-per-view cards previously, this has got to be. I can't see Eddie Hearn passing up on the opportunity to get this. Just as a side note, I know also with interest that Anthony Joshua is now being talked about fighting twice in May. So I predict what's going to happen is Frankie Gavin is suddenly going to drop off the Birmingham card in May to be replaced by Anthony Joshua against a sort of Jason Gavin type opponent. Someone where he won't risk injury or a loss ahead of the Kevin Johnson fight. And I see Frankie Gavin being taken from that bill suffering as a result, but that being the impetus to make this event pay-per-view, and Joshua headlining at Birmingham, as I say, against the Jason Gavin style fight. Let me know your thoughts. Am I barking up the wrong tree here? Do you agree with me that Brook Gavin is better than nothing? And what are your thoughts on the card? I mean, I must say, obviously nobody likes pay-per-view, but I must say I do think this is a very, very good card. I think the Bellew Cleverly card last year, it had more star power than this. James DeGale, it had George Groves. The main event was probably a bigger main event, even though it wasn't for a title. So, yeah, I think that had more star power, but what we complained about then was the lack of 50-50 matchups. And I think you've got that in abundance here. I would say 3 of the fights, Mitchell, Selby, and John Wayne Hibbert, are all 50-50s in my opinion. And I'd say the other 2, Kell Brook Gavin, Joshua versus Johnson, even though there's a strong choice, you'd favour one of the guys in each occasion, they're still competitive. It's not just a case of a one round job in either. So I really like this card. I'm really excited and looking forward to this card. I imagine the talk is not going to be about the card though, it's going to be about the pay-per-view. Let me know your thoughts. Am I right? Am I wrong? Thanks for watching.